Hello and welcome to this week's look at action and stunts on film and television. How are you? Welcome to Saturday. Yeah, I know, it's been 4 years we've had Wednesdays and Fridays, and you have a Saturday every once in a while. All of a sudden somebody goes, hang on, there's no YouTube show, what's going on? It's been a busy week, so we're trying to do the best we can. We're trying to catch up with all the other projects that we're working on, and we've decided that here it is, Saturday. So I hope you are fully relaxed after your week, and we can have a look at our topic this week. If you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know that we are talking about Carey Loftin, who is a remarkable stunt driver and coordinator, has worked on many projects over the years. You may remember him from Duel, of course. He was the truck driver in Duel. I think when you saw his hands, didn't you? Never saw him, but you just saw his hands, the Steven Spielberg picture as he chases Dennis Weaver about the place. A remarkable job, and back in some of the early 60s, it would have been, he was given a project which turned out to be an extraordinary job. The movie is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, 1963, and has a cast of thousands. Stanley Kramer was the director, and it cost $9 million. At the time, one of the most expensive comedy blockbusters. Now, I have to explain that. There have been bigger pictures, but for that budget, comedy really wasn't the type of budget that you'd be spending on a comedy picture. They got huge names in this picture, and it's a chase movie from one side of the states to the other, because Jimmy Durante, who has a little cameo at the start, decides to let people know that there's a huge sum of cash buried in a particular location, and they have to go and find it. And, whoever finds it first gets to keep it. So that's the plan. It was remade, I want to say, early 2000s, 2001 maybe, and I think they gave it the name Rat Race. And I remember John Cleese being in it, and I remember Rowan Atkinson being in it, for reasons better known to somebody else. It wasn't great. But this was the original, and some of the jobs planned on this were quite extraordinary. Carey brought in, because lots of driving gags. He's going to tell you himself in a moment about some of the jobs involved in this picture, but a truly spectacular picture to presumably be involved in. There are a number of sequences, and we will go through them after we've heard from the man himself. Here he is.
We had a meeting, and it had to be on a Saturday. We were making time and a half, and there had to be 18, 20 guys. And we get into part of the action. I see it one way, and Stanley sees it another. So there's a pretty good little argument. No, I can't win it, because he's the man. I said, Stanley, I'm only trying to do the job you hired me to do. He makes an announcement to the group. You know, I've never directed a comedy before. And I raised my voice and said, Stanley, you don't have to tell him that. It's a wonder he didn't fire me right there. We're at Palm Springs, of course, everything's all finished. And I know who he is, you know, with the gap in the teeth. So we had an outfit that I'm going to double him. Now, I went to makeup, and I had him black out my teeth right here. And I went over, and Stanley's talking to him. So, I got to be rude, just pull him around and say, is this all right, Mr. Kramer? He jerks away, and he goes back talking to Terry. And I said, Mr. Kramer, I'm a busy man. Is this all right? And I'm keeping my lip down. But the third time I did that, he said, what's bugging you? I said, well, I want this okayed. He said, it's fine. I said, okay. Terry looked daggers at me. And then we became real good friends, you know, because I pulled that gag on him. Yeah, we had 6 weeks pre-production, no dialogue, all stunt. Now, he takes the whole cast down to see this deal.
One would go and the other would stop and go, and the cars were doing takes.
The most magnificent footage I'd ever seen of. It was entrancing, it captivating it. And I said to somebody, I don't know what they need us for.
Buddy Hackett says to him when it's over, Stanley, you mean you're going to spoil this beautiful picture by have us trying to put dialogue in there? I told him, I said, well, my premiere was a success. I hope yours don't flop. Sid Caesar, I believe he's got this hammer and he's trying to knock this switch off the wall. And he swings, and he swings, and he swings. And he said, look, it don't do anything. It just stands there. And Stanley would crack up himself. I told him, I said, son, if you can't contain yourself, you'll have to leave the set. Yeah. He's the most unmechanical man I've ever met in my life. One of the nicest, but really unmechanical. He don't know how anything works. But when you tell him something, he writes it down in longhand, and he can write real fast. You better be correct, because he'll read it back to you. He's tough to work for, you know, on account of that. Went out and did this where go through the tunnel, the wheel wobbles and wobbles and wobbles and out, hit the bank and roll it over. Milton Berle came up right after the rollover. Got his big cigar, drove his rolls up. Oh, I see you already. I was hoping to get here in time to see Carey turn it over. How was it? Stanley sees me. Awful, awful. We only had the one Jeep, but it's just terrible. I said, Mr. Burrell, don't you believe it. You know what you did yesterday? 20 times he had you running out of that ditch because he didn't like the way you were talking. If it wasn't great, he'd have a line of trucks out there for me to turn over yet.
But he was brave when those automobile chases, and that was really rough work. Brave, dangerous. And if he's ever going to watch this, I hope he's well and he keeps well and keep doing what he's doing.
I had like a week or 10 days I hadn't done a thing, so naturally I'm in the bar drinking. I hadn't even checked the schedule because as far as I know I had several more days I don't have any stunts. Kramer came in and he looked at me and he caught me off guard. He said, do you know what you have to do tomorrow? And I made the mistake of saying, no sir, I don't. He said, if I was you, I would get to bed immediately. Stop running up my bar bill. Oh, it's terrible. I went over, had a cabin, I drank buttermilk, I put my finger down my throat, and I got up early the next morning, go out to location. I still don't know what I'm gonna do. All I had to do, on my legs, bent up, there's a bucket there where Jimmy Durante kicks the bucket. That's all I had to do. And Stanley said, I saved myself a lot of money last night. I put that guy to bed early. Well, I read the production sheets after that. I said, hell, I could have done that. Loaded, Stanley, for Christ's sake.
Little look at some of the doubles. Carol Daniels, Stephanie Epper and Mae Boss. Doubling look at Carey and Phil. Good double too. Let's take a look at that turnover he was referring to earlier. The wheel, really straight wheel. Look at that, brilliant coming out. And then he comes out on 3 wheels, pitches it up and over it goes in fine style. He's not wearing a helmet, I don't think, either. I think he's just got the hat on. So he pitches it up, and at the very, very top there is, I think, some form of kicker, like a little railway sleeper possibly. Chucks it over to the left. There's got to be some form of roll cage in there, but, I mean, it looks like it's in fairly decent nick after it's finished its roll. The roof doesn't look like it's about to cave in. And brave boy. Definitely, because, you know, look at the type of safety precautions they have these days compared to then. Absolutely extraordinary. Right, let's have a look at some of the driving. And there's all manner of stuff going on here, chucking it in all directions with the taxis. They were given a great deal of leeway for the amount of work that they were able to do on real streets. Obviously, look, that looks like a very barren road. Anybody you see running across in front of you, by the way, they're all stunt people. Any other vehicle on the road will be a stunt person. They will be what's referred to as ND drivers. We've discussed this before. The two boys on the pavement, way away you go. Not wanting to leave it too late. There is one who does in a moment, and I'll show you that. Sliding about. Once they start back projection, Spencer Tracy doing his best. There's back projection, there's front projection on these as well. Throwing these cars about. They couldn't be easy. Oh, there's another one parked in the middle of the road, as you do. So this is all tracking stuff round by the policeman or the crossing guard or whatever they call him. Front projection there as he pitches it to the left. There's all that happening, and now they're against the flow of traffic, and so everything else that's moving towards them will be stunt drivers. They will be aware of what they can and can't do. That's a nice slide. Throws it into this one here. There's an alleyway coming up. Oh, here it comes. Big turn to the right, up the alley. Now watch the two boys in the alley as the car approaches them, right? The fella on the right-hand side, and he just seems to leave it much later than he should do. He's, instead of being gone there, he waits, he staggers a bit more, and then he goes, and then he goes. And look how close he gets to that. That's, you could feel the breeze going past there. That's very close. I'd have reprimanded him myself. You've left that too long, yeah, clown. But I tell you what, on the screen it looks very, very good indeed. And finally pitching up in an alleyway. Frank Tallman, let's look at him and that incredible plane gag. Doubling these pair, comes flying through the billboard. And in training, of course, in testing, that was paper. But it just bang. Now, one of the engines goes, I believe, at that point. And it took a little bit off each wing too. Very, very tricky. The high work is a combination of footage, studio footage, and then is a combination of miniature and matte painting and a whole bunch of bits and pieces. So they're on the fire escape. That's matte painting in the background. To the left, it's a foreground miniature. Then they start sliding. This is studio stuff now. This is all stuntmen, right? There's no actors up there at all. All stunt guys, all hanging on, and they're grabbing for the suitcase. That's the plan. The suitcase, and the suitcase is now open. There's the studio shot with all the actors, and it's raining money. All the way. Spencer Tracy not amused by that, as you can tell. Now, this is the separate sequence where they're trying to get off the ladder. Look at this. He comes flying. This is Sid Caesar's character. Bang. That's Carl Sachs doubling him. And he's come down there like a ton of bricks. And then Sid comes along and does the and drops off. Another one goes here in a moment, but I think that this is a taxi driver, so it's a high fall for the first part, then a dummy, then an actual drop into the water afterwards. So they're doing that a lot. That's a matte painting in the background, and this miniature being flung about. This is Eddie Smith. Eddie Smith goes backwards from here, that's maybe 30 feet, then a dummy, and then bounce on the trampoline, and then fly through the air and land in the rubbery arms of Mr. Washington. Look, or Mr. Lincoln, I should say. I beg your pardon. What was I talking about? So yeah, you can see it's a rubber statue. It's moving about all over the place, and that was a nice little gag there. The bouncing on the trampoline. Another one coming up here, as they again, it's giving the impression it's going quite. Look, and then it goes really quickly when you look at it from the other shot. Here's Phil Silvers. This is Carey Loftin doubling him through the window, pitching onto the bed, and landing right smack in the middle for it then to be triggered and fired up into its not usable position. Boom. That's comedy, folks, right there. Visual gags. Loving this. Few more to dispose of yet as it flings about onto the trees. And the guy's been told, get off, it's going, go. So he goes. and then these guys are dropped onto, again, dummies, dropped onto there. Then there's the insert of the stunt people and the actors, and then they are pitched off and they are thrown, dummies, and then dive from the crane. They'll have a separate crane where they'll dive into the water. It goes all the way down to there, it bounces all the way back again. And in the tree, of course, we've still got folk in the tree. Who's that? Jonathan Winters going next, another dummy, into there. Milton Berle going through there. Again, these are all dummy shots, another dummy shot there. And then George Robotham takes over for the slide down the table, way straight off the other end. And then Spencer Tracy. We leave the best till last. As he goes along, it's Bill Koch going down here, and he's got to hit the end through and down onto the bit below. That's really very clever stuff. He's done that beautifully. I'll lick the face off you, why not? So, as you can imagine, Carey would have had his hands full on that particular job. Some remarkable bits of action and very clever. I mean, again, we look at it now and we go, really? You know, that end sequence, for instance, with the ladder, the fire engine ladder, the building, that entire street sequence with the buildings at the end, that's a matte painting. It's a matte painting at the far end, and there are, I think, 3 layers of painting on top and a number of opticals on top. All of those buildings that you see in the skyline, if you just pay attention to that for a moment when you have another look at it, they're all taken from different locations and they're put together to create a skyline, lit very well. And then you have those mixture of shots, and what the director was concerned about and what the editor was concerned about was that, well, we're going to have live shots in the studio, which is the actors hanging onto the ladder and swaying about from side to side, and then we need to do those cut shots to go to somewhere else for a different perspective. So he said, well, that's okay, we'll just throw these, we'll have some random shots thrown in, and they're in there. They are random movements of the camera, allowing transposition from this shot to that shot there, and then they combine stunt performer and dummy. Now, I've always been, it's a comedy, right? So you have to take everything with a pinch of salt, just ease back on it slightly. There is a fall from one of the ladders, and the stunt guy drops down, and then it's a dummy dropping into the water. If that had been the stunt guy all the way down, it would have been, unless from an ADR perspective you could have, put humorous dialogue over the top of it, it may well have been quite an alarming fall. It's a very high fall. In the studio, they probably would have done the first part at, 30 feet, maybe less, and then cut to the dummy falling away, and then cut again to the stuntman falling into the water. So all of these little shots, and they combine them left, right, and centre. There's the guys bouncing on top of the electric cables, and that, of course, was all done from a wire rig above. They were cabled, and they were bounced on top of these cables. So it's all fascinating stuff. In its infancy, as we now understand it, the wire work that we have these days is extraordinary compared to what it was, but it had to come from somewhere. Carey rolling the car, right, doubling Terry Thomas on 3 wheels. He comes out of the tunnel, up the bank, and there's a little kicker on the end, kicker as we understand it today, but it's dressed in such a way that it's looking like a tree stump. It's probably a railway sleeper, and he just gets the end of it, kicks it, and rolls it over. If you look really closely at that, he's not wearing a helmet. He has Terry Thomas's hat on, or he's in costume, and there's no helmet there. Now, the car looks structurally safe as it rolls over. It's the roof isn't giving in, so I'm assuming there is some form of roll cage, not as we know it now, but something that will prevent the sides and the roof from collapsing in. But He's managed to do that, and as Milton Berle said himself, I came over to watch what you've done it already. Yeah, he said it was no good. The director says it's no good, but then Carey said, well, you've only got one car, so you weren't expecting another take, surely. If you were expecting a number of them, you'd have had them lined up left, right and centre, because they could afford it. You know, that was the other thing. They could definitely afford it. So a whole bunch of remarkable stuff, including Frank Tallman flying that plane through the billboard, which in itself is, you know, very dangerous. Very dangerous. From a test perspective, there was paper put in the gap, and he would fly through it, hit the target every time, straight down the middle, no bother at all. They then put billboard in it to give it the authenticity, and he hit it at the same, and the number 2 engine died, and stopped, the propeller stopped rotating, and a little parts of the wingtips came clean off, was sheared off as it went through, and he had to land very, very quickly indeed. Those type of remarkable pieces of work are never really taken into consideration, and that's why we have this show. So if you've never seen the movie, maybe plan it round your week. It's nearly 3 hours long, right? I'll give you that. It is nearly 3 hours long, and definitely you need to take a break in the middle of it, even if you're at home. There's a great deal to take on board, but it's huge fun. Do it in chunks if you have to. But watching the whole thing from start to finish, it is very, very entertaining and well worth a mention. Now, further down the line, of course, Carey went from that type of vehicular action to this type of vehicular action in the movie Bullitt.
In the beginning, we felt that we should start off working in close harmony at a racetrack so that Bill Hickman and myself would be used to working close to each other at high speed. So we went out to Cotati Raceway up above San Francisco and worked at high speeds at well over the ton mark.
Highly bred cars are capricious. The men who drive, like Hickman and McQueen, are sensitive to every twitch of the wheel. They react with strength and pinpoint timing.
It was very hairy and that's something that I'd want to do real quick.
Steve McQueen works by instinct, reflex, unconsciously concealed know-how. Above all is his reverence to authenticity. This is the story of his commitment to truth.
There are big problems, of course, in doing a chase as dangerous as this on the streets, is that nothing comes off, like wheels, axles, shock absorbers, because the things that we did in the streets with automobiles, I don't think will be done for a long, long time. We had Bill Hickman, who was probably one of the finest stunt drivers in the world today, and myself was probably the worst. Then we had both of our minds psyched in together. So then all we had to do was get the stuntmen, which we had 8, we thought were the best, and put them in cars to act as pedestrians, so that when we were going by them at well over 100 miles an hour, we knew what they were going to do, and they knew what we were going to do. And of course, a car coming at that speed, if you lose it and spin it, the men are in great jeopardy. Then, of course, we planned out our route. We were involved in approximately 22 to 30 square blocks. So we had close to 50 people stationed with walkie-talkies in different parts of the city that we were shooting in that would be able to give us clearances when to start and know that everything would be taken care of as far as people accidentally walking into the scene.
So, the chase is on. Everybody in this positions, and again, similar exercise here. You've got the 2 leads, Bill Hickman in one, the chase car, Steve McQueen in the other. The camera positions are such that you can recognize it's him the whole time, and they are doing their thing through the streets of San Francisco. Any other vehicle you find in the street, like that VW for instance, is there for safety, and that other car there. So they're all there for safety. They are there just in case. They will be familiar with what is going on. Any other vehicle that turns up is a stunt driver, and if it isn't, it is there. That's where we lose the camera. Look, there's a camera position gone there. So these other vehicles are there for the purpose of keeping everybody safe. The last thing you want is for there to be an accident and a wheel fly off or an axle fly off or something of that nature. You don't need that. Long shots, different camera angles, but this is why they were getting those days in doing the testing. Here's Bud Ekins, comes sliding in and just gets missed there. McQueen goes one side, he goes the other. Bill Hickman, incidentally, I didn't know this, but Bill Hickman was great friends with James Dean and was behind him on the day when he crashed in that car. In fact, he pulled him out of the wreckage. He's been involved in many things, the French Connection, for instance, Vanishing Point, the 7-Ups, of course, which is another picture that he was involved in, one of his last, in point of fact. So there's a couple of things to look at here. These terrific shots. There's the VW. As I say, it's always there just in case. It happens half a dozen times. It's there on the right-hand side of shot. It's there on the left-hand side of shot. And again, there's a different jump. So very important to have that around. You've seen that. Lots of people have mentioned that already. This is a terrific thing. So I was always under the impression that that was driven through at speed. It's not. I mean, it's not driven through. It is attached. The two cars are attached together. So as they get to this point here, they close into each other, bang, and then they are locked together at the front. Carey Loftin is driving the Mustang, and he is steering effectively with the use of that, and then lets it go at the last moment, controls it, lets it go, and it flies through the petrol station. So we've got a great deal to thank Carey Loftin for. These are two fabulous examples of him doing what he does to the very best of his ability. So, there you go. You've seen the list. You've seen the list of the top 10 greatest car chases in the world ever. Bullitt's always in there. Always, always in there. And when you now maybe realise that not only was it conceived by director Peter Yates, but also by the star, who happened to be the producer as well, admittedly, but Steve McQueen was so dedicated, and had been dedicated for many years. Lauren Janes was his stuntman for many years, and he'd said himself there were things that Steve did that some performers couldn't do. He was that dedicated to the cause. For him to be thinking out and going, right, we've got this car chase thing, I need to have somebody I can rely on to work with me and maybe give me a few pointers along the way. Bill Hickman, ideal choice, because as the commentary said there, he is one of the great stunt drivers. You've seen him, of course, in French Connection and a number of other pictures. So ideal choice for having that, for teaching Steve little bits of this, hitting the apex early, being able to slide out, power out of here. There's some lovely moments in the picture, and that sequence at the end, and for many, many years I was always under the impression that Bill Hickman was driving and it disappears off through the petrol station out the other side and the explosion happens. Now very clearly the cars are locked together, and they are locked together and they are activated by a trigger switch in the Mustang that Carey is driving. So this is technically a remote control car. It's empty, there's nobody in it. There might be a dummy in it, but there's nobody else in it. And Carey is in the Mustang, effectively the Steve McQueen double, and then he lets the car go, gives it a quick shunt, and it goes off in that direction, and there it loses complete control and disappears through the petrol station. That's the detail that we look at for Carey Loftin, a specialist in his idea. He's realised by the time you come around that turn, you are really shifting. There's a little bit of like a central reservation thing, very small, but a central reservation thing to get over. And you will note that when that Dodge Charger gets there and hits it, it gets airborne and the wheel hubs come off again, and it bounces all over the place. And it fires on through, and it's very, very clever. He's worked all this out, so we can do this in a better way. We don't need to have anybody in the car. Let's do it this way for safety. And finally, the green VW. You've spotted it before. If you've been watching that chase, they go up and down the hills, and it's always there. It's always there. Why is it there? It is there for safety. It's a safety vehicle which they throw in from time to time to make sure that no other vehicle that is wandering about decides, oh, there's a gap in the traffic, I'll just come through. No. This particular section has been closed off for a purpose. And the idea, of course, that McQueen and Bill Hickman are the only two drivers on that. The rest are stunt performers, but they are ND drivers. They are there from a safety perspective. So when they are going towards traffic, when they are avoiding traffic, they are all stunt people in the car in those certain sections of road, and everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Also very good to see Bud Ekins there on the motorcycle. There was a great story, and Bud Ekins told it himself, in point of fact, that there was a moment where Steve McQueen was driving the car, came down, turned the car into camera, wasn't quite hitting the mark, and one morning they told Steve to be on set by a certain time, and Bud had got in the car and he did it. And then when Steve turned up, he said, well, what do you mean we're done? We can't be done. I haven't done the thing yet. And Bud had done it already. Now, I'm not entirely certain of that. It's a great story nonetheless, but I'm not entirely certain that it's as accurate maybe as it's planned to be. When you see, of course, all of those camera angles that have been done specifically for the purpose of making sure that wherever that camera is in the car, you can see McQueen behind the wheel. And I think that was crucial to all of this. In those early days of putting the actor right in the middle of it, you know, the Tom Cruise of today, the Steve McQueen of yesterday, that type of shot. And it's massively impressive when you look at it over that chase sequence. It's funny how it's a great movie, but not many people remember anything else from the picture apart from that car chase. But rightly so, it is a spectacular piece of work. And I hope you've enjoyed that. We will regroup and be back. We'll be back Wednesday. Don't panic. We will be back Wednesday. It was just a temporary thing. Thursday, Saturday this week. Wednesday, Friday next week. So we'll be back to normal with a little something more. And if you've enjoyed that, go and subscribe. Why don't you? The little buttons down there already, over here or over there maybe. Go and push the button and hit the bell for notifications, and also go and support the Pod Dojo Network, who are responsible for the podcast. And well, we'll do it all again next time, shall we? Until then, it's bye for now.